What's the most supernatural experience you've ever had? My remote once jumped off the TV by itself. The old school box type of television. When I was watching with my girlfriend. Didn't fall or slide off. We actually saw it take a leap as if somebody threw it. We both just sat there being really confused before even questioning it out loud. When I was between the ages of 4 to 6. I used to see a little blonde boy through this mirrored armoire in my parents' bedroom. The armoire was big and wooden, but had mirrored accents and mirrors running all the way around the base. If I laid on the carpet in front of it and looked into the mirrors on the bottom, sometimes I'd see a little blonde boy in a red sweater in the corner of the room, far away and a little distorted but still very clear. He would sit with his back to me, looking out the windows to the backyard. I don't remember ever seeing his face. I don't think I saw him many times, but I do remember his image very clearly. In my little kid mind, I thought I invented this super neat mirror trick by myself. So I tried to get my parents to see it too. They always refused, and my mom especially would get super mad at me for asking. I stopped seeing the boy when I stopped playing in their bedroom as much, and knew mirrors shouldn't work like that. When I got older, I chalked it up to my overactive kid brain. Didn't think much of it, tbh. Years and years later, when I was an adult and long after my parents had sold that house, my mom asked me about the armoire out of the blue, then told me that she used to see the little boy too. Not in the mirrors, but sometimes just out the corners of her eyes. Like she'd be cooking and catch a glimpse of blonde hair pass by her hips. At a kid's height. And occasionally in dreams. It didn't happen too often, but just enough to deeply freak them out. So when I mentioned seeing the same little boy, my mom was just terrified herself. There were other strange stuff in that house, but this was 100% the most vivid I remember. January 1, 2003. A stretch of road between two coastal towns in Australia. It was a dark and stormy night. No. Really. It was. Driving along with my partner. I noticed a car coming up behind us. Traveling fast. It was a single-lane road, so we couldn't move over. I said to my partner, "This guy is in a hurry. Let him overtake you." My partner agreed, and he moved left as soon as there was an overtaking lane. The car pulled up beside us and then disappeared. There was nowhere it could have gone. We sat in silence for a few minutes, and I said, "Did you see that?" He said, "Yep." When I was 16, an uncle, Dad's brother, passed unexpectedly. Weeks later, I had a dream about him, and he told me to quit smoking cigarettes. It was way more involved, but it's been 20 plus years, so I don't remember the rest. A month or so later, I mentioned the dream to my parents, and my dad started crying, got up and walked away. Apparently he dreamed of talking to his brother too. And he'd told my dad that he, uncle, needed to talk to me. Edit. All the stories are beautiful. I'm so glad so many of us have been visited by loved ones after they passed. And thank you all for your advice, encouragement on quitting. Love to each and every one of you. I had a dream my dog had gone to a distant corner of our heavily wooded backyard and dug a hole to get out. Which was odd because he wasn't a digger. He was stuck on the other side of the chain link fence because the hole was at a steep angle and he couldn't squeeze back through. I lifted the fence up enough for him to get back through. The next day I got home and the yard was eerily quiet. He'd usually run up to greet me. I thought of the dream and walked straight to the corner where I found him waiting on the other side of the fence and let him in. I used to do pest control. Went to a customer's business for the first time. As I walked in the office, I noticed some pictures that were supposed to be hanging on the wall were on the ground, and then saw some papers which looked like they had been thrown and scattered off a desk. I picked everything up so I could apply treatment to the floor, boards and surrounding rooms. I then went to treat the only restroom in the office. I simply knocked on the door as a courtesy, as I always do before entering any restroom. There was no reply, for nobody was in there, so I went and applied treatment to the restroom, and I closed the door behind me. As I walked away from the door, I know I heard somebody grab the door handle, twist it open and open the door. I turned around and looked to see nobody behind me but a door swinging open. The hair on my neck instantly stood up, and I put two and two together. I grabbed my shit and ran downstairs. The receptionist saw me and started laughing. She asked me if I had met their little friend upstairs. I worked for an online retailer warehouse for a few months. There were two depressing windows that obviously were the bare minimum required for zoning that I probably walked by 1,000 times a day. Outside you'd see a concrete retaining wall. And some trucks. Obviously after a while I'd barely see out of my periphery. Wall, trucks. Trucks, wall. Until one day I saw trucks, and then in the second window, pigs. It was only a second, but I definitely saw a bunch of massive pigs in fenced-in areas, with a rolling hills beyond. Of course. When I looked back, no pigs. For the next few weeks I stared out the windows when I went past, always seeing nothing but that wall. It was only when I got lazy and stopped paying attention that it happened again. Pigs. Hill. Then looked back and gone. Apparently the land used to be a farm. Never found out if it was a pig farm. I like to think it's a flash of the past and not the GHOSTS of bacon. My best friend's dad, who was a second father to me, came to me in a dream and told me to tell my best friend that he loved her and that he was sorry. I woke up to my cell phone ringing to find it was my best friend, absolutely hysterical, telling me that he finally passed away from sclerosis. I sobbed all day. He was a drunk our whole lives, but it still hurt. When I was around 17, I got out of bed to go get my dog out of his kennel and feed him. As I passed one of the cabinets, a voice whispered in my ear, "Wake up." I could feel the breath and everything and literally just froze for a few seconds. And ran upstairs telling myself, "What the fuck?" repeatedly. It has messed with me to this day. I'd rather have heard absolutely anything else because wake up just messes with you. I've posted about this before. But when I was about 9 years old, 1995, in the middle of a bright summer day, I went to the refrigerator to get a popsicle. Suddenly a roughly teenage-looking guy, with long brown hair, wearing a beige turtleneck and red plaid bell-bottoms, turned around the corner into the hallway to my left, then vanished from toe to head as I looked at him. Told no one about it for years. Until after my mother mentioned meeting the now grown kids who lived in the house before us, who asked her if she'd seen the bell-bottom ghost. My grandfather loved my grandmother a lot. He would constantly tell her she was beautiful and would always do embarrassing things to make her laugh. Unfortunately, she died a few months after being diagnosed with cancer. This affected him a lot, but as time went on he came to terms with it. My grandfather lived on for another 18 years. In his final years he developed really bad Alzheimer's that led him to forget that his wife had passed away and would often call for her or ask us where she went. We'd explained to him that she had passed away, but it always made him distressed and upset, so we decided to tell him she'll be back soon. Every time he asked where she was. A month or so before my grandfather passed away, I was at his house with my mother and we were all sitting in the living room. My grandfather, who was seated on his chair, all of a sudden starts frantically asking us where my grandmother was. We calmly explained to him that she'll be back soon and she was just out doing some chores. Unlike most times, he was being persistent on wanting to see her. We explained to him again that she'll be back soon, but he kept getting more persistent. He started to frantically call for her. He screamed her name as loud as he could over and over again until out of nowhere every single door and window in the room flung open all at once. Now we could say that it was just wind, but all the doors and windows in the house had secure locks and would stay locked at all times since my grandfather would wander off or forget to lock his doors. All the doors and windows burst open and at that same second my grandfather, who was facing the front door, says, "What took you so long? I've been waiting for you." With a smile. My mother and I didn't see the person my grandfather talked to, but I'm sure that he saw his wife. My husband and I were traveling through New South Wales, Australia, and stayed at a lovely motel. In the morning we went down to breakfast and most of the other people had already left, so we were almost alone. Suddenly a glass flew across an empty table and landed on the floor. I was facing that direction and fully saw it as if it was pushed across the table. I looked behind me at the only other couple and they were wide-eyed and confused. Apparently the motel has a permanent resident that likes attention. Not sure if this counts as supernatural, but here it goes. The summer after I graduated high school I got a job delivering pizza to help save money for college. I had a lot of run-ins with some pretty weird characters, but nothing like what happened this one night. It was a Friday night. We deliver pizzas until 3 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays. It was 2:45 a.m. and we were preparing to close when our manager said we got a call for a delivery at place almost 20 minutes away. Being the desperate for money teenager I was, I offered to do the delivery. This was before smartphones had GPS, so I used a Garmin. I plugged in the address and off I went. The Garmin took me deep into the backwoods of rural Texas. I finally arrived to my destination. The house looked like something in a horror movie. Big wooden 2-story house with no lights on. The first thing I noticed about the house was that the front door was wide open. I sat in my car for a few minutes debating on turning back and claiming no one was home. Something just didn't feel right. I needed the tip money, so I sucked it up and approached the house. When I got to the open front door, I didn't enter. Instead, I knocked. No one answered. I knocked again as loud as I could. No response. I finally got the courage to say something. Pizza delivery. Anyone home? There was a few seconds of silence until I heard a weird voice. Upstairs. I walked in the house and could barely make out my surroundings because it was so dark. I make it to the bottom of the stairs and look up into the dark abyss. Again I said, "Pizza delivery." The voice spoke again. "Come upstairs." I can't get out of bed. Something was very off about this voice. It didn't sound normal. The best I can describe it as if a dog somehow learned to talk but still had trouble pronouncing human words. The hairs stood up on my neck. There was no fucking way I was going up there. The tip wasn't worth it. I placed the pizza at the bottom of the stairs and shouted, "I'm leaving it here at the bottom of the stairs. Have a good night." As I turned away, the voice said, "No. Come upstairs. I can't get out of bed." I replied, "I'm sorry, I'm not even allowed to enter someone's home on the job. You'll have to come get it." I heard some loud banging from upstairs with the voice shouting at full volume, "Come upstairs. I can't come out of bed." The voice shouted this over and over again like it was a recording on a loop. The banging got louder and louder as the voice got louder. I noped the fuck out of there at full speed. To this day I have no idea what the fuck happened in that house. Edit. I was not expecting so many people to be interested in this story. I'll try to answer some common questions. They were supposed to pay by cash, so I guess they got the pie on the house. Fuck no, I never went back. Not even during the day. A lot of people are saying old or crippled person. Then who the fuck left the front door wide open? No, I didn't try to turn on the light. It was already so late, I just wanted to drop off the pizza and go home. A lot of you are talking about skinwalkers. I had to Google it, and I must say this story is a lot more creepier after reading about them. This was in spring. TX.